They never told you this, but I will. Because if you're over 70 and still masturbating the way you always have, you could be seconds away from a stroke and not even know it. That's not an exaggeration, it's medical fact. Some of the most common innocent habits older men do during self-pleasure, like holding your breath, sitting too long, or skipping a warm-up, are quietly setting the stage for blood clots, vascular stress, and in some cases, sudden strokes in the middle of the night. I'm Dr. James, professor of urology and men's health physician with over 30 years of experience treating aging men across America. And what I'm about to share may surprise you, because no one talks about it, but I've seen it up close, time and time again. Here's the paradox. Masturbation is natural and healthy, but only when done right. After 70, your body isn't the same. Your blood vessels are more fragile, your circulation is slower, and the wrong technique, no matter how small, can have life-altering consequences. In this video, I'll walk you through 7 critical mistakes that men over 70 must avoid starting tonight. I'll show you how to protect your heart, your brain, and still enjoy your intimacy, safely, confidently, and without fear. And the very first mistake is one you've likely done this week, without even realizing it. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time to do it. And don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss another life-saving tip designed specifically for men over 70. If this topic hits home for you, type 1 in the comments. If not, type to 0. Your feedback helps me create content that truly serves your health. All right, let's get into it. And we'll start with the most dangerous mistake I see men over 70 make far too often. It seems harmless, even natural. But this one habit, done in the heat of the moment, can silently spike your blood pressure, restrict oxygen to your brain, and set the stage for a stroke without warning. Let me explain. Mistake number 1, holding your breath. During Climax, Valsalva Reflex. I'll never forget the day Robert came into my office. He was 74, fairly active, and had always taken pride in staying independent. But that week, something changed. He told me he had a strange, pulsing headache after climaxing alone the night before. No warning, no pain beforehand, just a tightness in his neck, some dizziness, and then the fear that something had gone wrong. Tests showed he'd experienced a minor silent stroke, and the root cause? Something no one had ever warned him about: holding his breath during orgasm. This is far more common than most men realize. Especially after 70, it becomes instinctual. Tense up, strain, hold the breath, and push through the climax. But what feels like intensity or focus is actually a dangerous internal event called the Valsalva reflex. It's when you bear down, like during a bowel movement, or hold your breath while exerting, and it causes a sudden spike in internal chest pressure. That pressure sends shockwaves through the vascular system, particularly in the brain, neck, and heart. In younger men with flexible arteries and fast-reacting blood flow, the body can usually recover quickly. But after 70, your vascular system isn't as forgiving. Arteries are stiffer, blood flow is slower, and that spike, just a few seconds of breath holding during climax, can cause blood vessels to narrow dangerously or rupture microscopic capillaries in the brain. The result? You wake up the next morning with a dull headache, vision changes, or worse, you never wake up at all. In Robert's case, the stroke was minor, but the damage could have been permanent. And what shocked him most was that no doctor had ever warned him that something as small and unconscious as holding your breath could be life-threatening in his 70s. I see this often. Men who are otherwise healthy, eating well, staying active, yet in those few private moments they unknowingly push their bodies to the edge. The irony is that climax should be a release, not a strain. But over time, many men develop patterns of tension without realizing it. Maybe it's habit, maybe it's shame, maybe it's a subtle fear that they're not as strong as they used to be. So they push harder, not knowing that this pressure is doing more harm than good. So what can you do? It's simpler than you think. Begin with awareness. The next time you're alone, pay attention to your breath. If you find yourself clenching, tensing, or holding, gently guide yourself to exhale, especially during climax. Breathing out releases pressure, relaxes the body, and allows your blood vessels to stay open and responsive. Some of my patients even practice slow, rhythmic breathing during intimacy, almost like meditation. And the result? Not just safety, but better satisfaction, better blood flow, and a stronger sense of control. Robert took this advice seriously. Months later, he told me he felt calmer, more connected to his body, and less afraid. His blood pressure had improved. His sleep was deeper, and most importantly, he was no longer putting himself at silent risk. He had learned how to enjoy pleasure without pushing his body to the edge. But holding your breath isn't the only hidden danger. In fact, there's one silent habit that men over 70 do almost every day, without realizing that it thickens their blood and increases their risk of clotting during self-pleasure. And it starts with what you're not drinking. Let's talk about that next. Mistake number 2. Masturbating while dehydrated. A few years ago, I was working with a patient named Frank. He was 76, a retired school principal who took his health seriously. He ate well, walked every morning, and even tracked his blood pressure religiously. But one morning, he called me, concerned. He said he'd woken up dizzy with tightness in his chest and what felt like a pounding inside his skull. No numbness, no slurred speech, just a strange fog and heaviness he couldn't shake. After running a few tests, we found something troubling. His blood viscosity was high, meaning his blood was thicker than it should be. The culprit? Dehydration. But not from forgetting to drink water during the day. It was what he did the night before. He'd had an intense solo session right before bed after skipping dinner and barely drinking fluids all day. Here's what most men don't realize. After age 70, your body doesn't regulate hydration the same way. You may not feel thirsty, but your blood becomes thicker faster. And when your blood thickens, even slightly, it flows more slowly through your vessels, increasing resistance and creating the perfect storm for microclots, especially during physical activity. And yes, masturbation is a form of physical activity. It raises your heart rate, contracts your muscles, and shifts blood pressure. When you combine that with dehydration, you're putting serious strain on your circulatory system. Most men associate dehydration with heat stroke or fatigue, but in older adults, it often shows up in more subtle, silent ways, like lightheadedness, irregular heartbeat, or that strange, cloudy feeling in the head. The truth is, even mild dehydration can increase clotting factors in the blood, reduce plasma volume, and make it harder for your heart to push blood through already narrowed vessels. When you climax in this state, the temporary rise in heart rate can actually cause a clot to dislodge, and that's where the stroke risk begins. Frank was stunned. He thought hydration was just about avoiding cramps or dry skin, but what he didn't know, and what so many men overlook, is that your blood is your lifeline, and without enough water, it can turn from a flowing river into a slow, sticky stream. And when that stream clogs at the wrong moment, especially during a spike in pressure like orgasm, it can lead to life-altering consequences. After our talk, Frank made a simple shift. He started drinking a full glass of water every evening, especially on days when he planned to be intimate, even with himself. It wasn't about making the experience clinical, it was about respecting his body, preparing it, and protecting what mattered most: his brain, his heart, and his independence. Weeks later, he told me something that stayed with me. He said, "Doctor, I never thought a glass of water could give me peace of mind, but now I know I'm not taking chances. I'm showing up for myself, even in private." And that's really the heart of it. Masturbation isn't just physical, it's vascular. And when you're over 70, hydration is one of the easiest, most powerful ways to protect your pleasure and your health at the same time. But there's another common mistake that's just as overlooked, and it doesn't have to do with what you drink, but how quickly you start. Because the next danger comes not from dehydration, but from what happens when you jump in too fast, without giving your body time to catch up. Let me explain. Mistake number 3, ignoring circulation warm-up, going straight into it cold. A man named Harold came to see me a while back. He was 78, widowed, and living alone. He was a quiet, thoughtful man who didn't talk much about intimacy, but during one visit, he opened up. He told me that every now and then he'd have what he called a personal moment, but lately it left him feeling off. Not in pain, but drained, almost dizzy. He described a strange pressure in his chest, a pounding in his head, and a wave of exhaustion afterward that lingered through the night. What Harold didn't realize, and what many older men never hear, is that our bodies, especially after 70, aren't designed to jump into intense physical activity without preparation. That includes sexual activity. When you go from sitting still for hours, watching TV, reading, or even lying down, and suddenly begin stimulating yourself, you're shocking a system that's been running in low gear. It's like revving a cold engine on a winter morning. The oil hasn't circulated, the parts aren't moving smoothly, and yet without a proper warm-up, we ask our heart to race, our blood vessels to dilate, and our nervous system to shift gears in seconds. That kind of abrupt transition may not seem dangerous, but in men over 70, it can trigger a cascade of problems. Blood pressure spikes, muscle strain, even tiny tears in vessel linings that can contribute to clot formation or vascular instability. You see, good circulation isn't automatic at this age. Your body needs a little time, a little movement, a signal that it's safe to open the valves and let the blood flow. When you ignore that and go straight into stimulation, you force the heart and vessels to adapt instantly, and sometimes they don't. I've had patients who experience temporary vision blurring, headaches, or even heart palpitations afterward simply because they skipped this vital step. Harold had never thought of it that way. For decades, intimacy had been something spontaneous, something you just did when the mood struck. But after our conversation, he changed his approach. Now, whenever he planned a private moment, he took 5 minutes beforehand to walk slowly around the house, stretch his arms and legs, or do a few rounds of slow breathing. He even told me it became a peaceful ritual, something that made the experience feel more intentional, less rushed, and much more fulfilling. And it worked. Within weeks, the dizziness disappeared. His sleep improved. And perhaps most importantly, his relationship with his own body softened. He no longer felt at odds with his aging physiology. He was working with it, not against it. I tell this story because it's so common and so easy to fix. The idea that a warm-up is only for athletes or workouts is a myth. At this stage of life, a warm-up is how you honor your body. It's how you protect your heart, your brain, and your blood vessels from unnecessary strain, and it's how you give yourself permission to feel good without fear. But while ignoring circulation is a silent mistake, what happens when you're seated too long, especially in certain positions, can be even more dangerous. In fact, it's one of the hidden reasons older men form clots in the legs and never know until it's too late. Let's talk about that next. Mistake number 4, masturbating while sitting too long. A man named Gerald, 81, came to my office one afternoon with a concern he found hard to explain. He'd been feeling a dull ache in his left calf, mostly when resting. No injury, no swelling that stood out, just a deep, almost warm discomfort that didn't go away. After running a few tests, we found what I feared, a developing clot in one of the deep veins of his leg, a condition we call DVT, or deep vein thrombosis. When I asked him about his routine, one detail stood out. Most evenings, he would sit for long stretches watching television or reading, and often when he did engage in solo intimacy, he stayed seated in the same recliner for over an hour without moving. This isn't uncommon. Many men, especially as they get older, find comfort in doing things while seated. Recliners, armchairs, even the edge of the bed. It feels easier, safer. But what most don't realize is that sitting for too long without moving, especially when combined with physical stimulation, can restrict blood flow from the lower body and increase the risk of blood pooling in the legs. That pooling becomes dangerous when the blood thickens and begins to clot. When you're seated, especially in a bent position, hips folded, knees up, the blood flow in your thighs and calves slows down significantly. Add to that the increase in pressure during arousal, and now your blood is moving faster in some areas and slower in others. That mismatch can create the perfect condition for a clot to form, especially in veins that aren't being actively engaged or massaged by muscle movement. Gerald had never connected the dots. Like many men, he figured as long as he was feeling okay, there was no harm. But the body after 70 doesn't bounce back the same way. Veins are less elastic, the blood's clotting factors are more sensitive, and sedentary pressure builds silently. A clot in the leg may not seem urgent until it travels. If that clot breaks loose and moves to the lungs or brain, it becomes a life-threatening emergency within minutes. What moved Gerald the most wasn't the diagnosis. It was the realization that a simple shift could have protected him. He started making small changes. Before any intimate activity, he'd stand, walk around, even stretch gently for a few minutes. He no longer stayed planted in one position. Sometimes he would lie back with his legs extended or use a pillow to keep his hips open. It wasn't about perfection, it was about listening to his body, respecting it, giving his blood a reason to move. And within weeks, that ache in his leg faded. His circulation improved, and more importantly, he began to see intimacy not as something disconnected from health, but as part of it, something worth preparing for, like you would a good night's sleep or a walk in the sun. What I want every man to know is this: movement matters. Even a few minutes can make the difference between healthy blood flow and silent danger. Your veins aren't just pipes, they're living tissue, and they need to feel alive too. Now, while sitting too long can restrict blood flow, there's another surprising mistake that happens when you do the opposite, when you relax too quickly, especially at night. It has to do with what happens after climax and the way your nervous system suddenly shifts. And if you're not careful, that shift can leave your heart vulnerable in ways you'd never expect. Let me show you what I mean. Mistake number 5. Doing it right before bed without recovery time. Not long ago, I had a patient named Lewis. He was 79, widowed, soft-spoken, and deeply thoughtful. He came to me not for a specific problem, but because he said, "Something feels off with my sleep and I can't explain it." He had no major illnesses, stayed fairly active for his age, and kept up with his regular checkups. But over the last few months, he had been waking up in the middle of the night with a racing heart, shallow breathing, and a strange heaviness in his chest. There was no pain, just a sense that something wasn't quite right. After ruling out cardiac issues and sleep apnea, we had a conversation, an honest one, about his nighttime habits. And that's when it came out. Most nights, Lewis would masturbate just before falling asleep. He saw it as a way to relax, to help him drift off. But what he didn't realize was that this well-meaning routine was quietly placing stress on his cardiovascular system and not giving his body enough time to return to balance before sleep. You see, climax activates the sympathetic nervous system, the part of your body that handles arousal, alertness, even fight or flight. Your blood pressure rises, your heart beats faster, and your vessels contract to manage the surge. But once the moment is over, the body needs time to recalibrate, to shift gears from stimulation to rest. And for older men, especially over 70, this shift doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. And if you fall asleep too quickly after climax, you may enter rest while your system is still under tension. That's when trouble begins. During sleep, the body transitions into the parasympathetic state, the rest and repair phase. It lowers blood pressure, slows the heart, and directs blood flow to the brain and internal organs. But if your body is caught between two states, still stimulated yet trying to shut down, it can lead to instability. That instability can disrupt sleep cycles, affect oxygen delivery to the brain, and even contribute to nocturnal blood pressure spikes that most men never detect. Lewis's symptoms made perfect sense in this light. His heart was being asked to slow down while still recovering from stimulation. His blood vessels were trying to dilate and relax while still contracting from recent climax. It was like hitting the brakes while your foot was still on the gas. What helped Lewis wasn't medication, it was time. I asked him to shift his routine. Instead of falling asleep immediately after intimacy, he gave himself 30 to 45 minutes of gentle recovery. He'd sit quietly, stretch, breathe slowly, even read something light. It wasn't about denying himself pleasure, it was about giving his body the respect and time it needed to reset. and the results were remarkable. His sleep improved, the racing heart stopped, and perhaps most importantly, he stopped feeling afraid of what his body might do while he was resting. What I want every man to understand is this: Climax is not the end. It's a part of a bigger physiological journey, and your body deserves time to come back to center before you hand over control to sleep. Especially at this stage in life, recovery isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Now, while timing can make or break your body's ability to rest, frequency carries a different kind of weight. There's a quiet danger in doing it too often, without giving your system enough time to rebuild its core energy. And the consequences might not show up right away, but when they do, they can affect far more than just your blood flow. Let me walk you through it. Mistake number 6: excessive frequency without rebuilding time. There's a story I often think about when this topic comes up. A man named Walter, 81 years old, came to see me with a simple but honest concern. He said, "Doc, I'm tired, but not the kind of tired that goes away with a nap. I feel drained, worn out, and I don't know why." Walter was sharp, funny, and still very much engaged in life. He walked every day, kept his blood pressure in check, and even cooked most of his own meals. But as we talked, I noticed something in his tone, almost a quiet frustration with his body. He didn't feel sick. He just didn't feel strong anymore. We went over his daily habits, medications, and overall health. And then gently I asked him about intimacy. His face turned a little red, but he smiled and said, "Well, I'm still active in that department, probably more than most men my age." When I asked how often, he said 3, sometimes 4 times a day. Alone, of course. And that's when it clicked. What Walter didn't know, and what most older men don't realize, is that excessive masturbation without enough recovery time can quietly exhaust the very systems that keep us strong: the vascular, hormonal, and nervous systems. After age 70, the body takes longer to rebuild nitric oxide, replenish testosterone, and restore neural energy after climax. And when that process is interrupted over and over again, it starts to drain the battery faster than it can recharge. Each time you climax, there's a brief but powerful release of dopamine, followed by a natural dip. Your blood vessels expand, then contract. Your nervous system peaks, then resets. And in a younger body, that bounce back is fast. But for someone in their 70s or 80s, that rebound can take hours, sometimes even days. If the body doesn't have time to reset, the consequences start to pile up. Lower energy, decreased erection quality, brain fog, poor sleep, and yes, even greater risk of cardiovascular strain. Walter had been using Climax as a way to cope with loneliness, boredom, and the long, quiet hours of retirement. He wasn't ashamed, nor should he have been, but he was unaware that his body was signaling for rest, for recovery, and for balance. When we reframed intimacy not as a coping mechanism but as a form of self-care, things began to shift. I encouraged Walter to scale back, not because something was wrong with him, but because something needed time to heal. He committed to a more balanced rhythm, 2 to 3 times a week with focus on preparation, hydration, and mindful breathing. Within a few weeks, his energy came back, his sleep deepened. He even reported that when he did climax, it felt more satisfying, less rushed, more connected. What I want you to understand is this: intimacy, like anything powerful, requires rhythm. Fire is a beautiful thing, but even a fire needs time to cool so the coals can gather strength again. And when you give your body that space, it rewards you with vitality, clarity, and confidence. But while overuse is a silent thief of energy, there's one final mistake that affects not just the body, but the mind. Because what you watch, what you feel, and how your brain responds during self-pleasure has a far deeper impact on your heart and your hormones than you might think. And it's one of the most overlooked risks I see in men over 70. Let's explore it next. Mistake number 7: watching overstimulating or stress-inducing content. Several years ago, a man named Martin came to see me. He was 75, divorced, and living alone in a quiet part of Texas. He'd had a few health scares, nothing too serious, but enough to make him cautious. What brought him in that day wasn't physical pain, it was confusion. "Doc," he said, "I don't know what's happening to me. I finish, and instead of feeling relaxed or satisfied, I feel anxious. Sometimes my heart races. Sometimes I can't sleep. It's like I'm wired and empty at the same time." At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. His blood work was normal. His medications hadn't changed, and he wasn't doing anything that would raise immediate red flags. But when I asked him what kind of material he was watching during his solo sessions, his face went quiet. "It's all so fast now," he admitted. "Everything online is extreme, loud, harsh, nothing soft. I don't know why I watch it. I just do. But afterward, I feel worse than when I started." Martin wasn't alone. I've had dozens of older patients tell me the same thing. What many men don't realize is that your brain is just as involved in intimacy as your body is. And when you overstimulate it with aggressive, chaotic, or emotionally disturbing content, your nervous system pays the price. After 70, the brain's ability to regulate dopamine becomes more fragile. That means sudden spikes, like the ones caused by high-speed adult content, don't reset as easily. You get a quick hit of excitement, followed by a crash that can leave you feeling anxious, agitated, or emotionally flat. Add in the shame or guilt that often tags along with that kind of material, and you've got a recipe for chronic stress, and stress is no friend to your heart. But it's not just about emotions. These neurological crashes can directly impact your vascular health. The sympathetic nervous system, the same one that revs your body during stress, tightens your blood vessels, elevates your heart rate, and increases blood pressure. That kind of tension during or after climax doesn't just feel bad, it increases your stroke risk, especially in men with already compromised circulation. Martin started making changes. It wasn't easy. He shifted away from fast, overstimulating videos and started leaning into memory, imagination, and when needed, slower, more respectful content. At first, he said it felt strange, like trying to relearn something he thought he already knew. But over time, something changed. His heart rate stabilized, his anxiety faded, and maybe most importantly, he began to feel connected to himself again. Not used up, not overstimulated, just present. That's something I want every man to experience. The difference between stimulation and satisfaction. Between escape and connection. The truth is, your brain is the command center of your body's health, and what you feed it during moments of pleasure matters far more than most men think. So if you've ever felt uneasy after watching something too intense, if you've ever felt your heart pounding long after the screen goes dark, or if you've simply lost that sense of peace afterward, know this, it's not you. It's what your brain is being asked to carry, and you have the power to change that. Now that you've heard all 7 of these mistakes, the silent risks men rarely talk about, I want to leave you with something even more important, because understanding the dangers is only half the story. What really matters now is how you begin to heal. And in just a moment, I'll walk you through exactly how to reclaim your strength, protect your heart, and enjoy intimacy again with confidence, clarity, and peace of mind. Conclusion. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you, not just for watching, but for listening with an open mind and an open heart. These are not easy topics to talk about. I know that. For most men over 70, intimacy is a private matter, something rarely discussed, even with doctors. But the truth is, those quiet, personal moments hold deep meaning. And if we don't talk about them honestly, we risk letting shame and silence take the place of real health. The 7 mistakes we've covered today may seem small at first glance. Holding your breath, forgetting to drink water, jumping in without warming up, sitting too long, climaxing right before bed, doing it too often, and watching the wrong kind of content. Each of these might seem like a minor detail, but in a man's 70s and beyond, where the body is more sensitive, more vulnerable, and more in need of rhythm and respect, these habits can quietly stack up and create real risk. I've seen it firsthand. Men who felt fine one day and ended up in the ER the next. Not from some sudden trauma, but from years of ignoring the subtle ways their bodies were trying to communicate. And I've also seen the opposite. Men who made small changes, just one or two at a time, and watched their energy return, their confidence rebuild, and their sense of peace deepen. I still think about men like Robert, who never knew that holding his breath during Climax could trigger a stroke. Or Harold, who learned to walk for 5 minutes before intimacy and found his circulation dramatically improved. Frank, who started drinking water beforehand and began sleeping better. Lewis, who simply gave his body a little more time to recover before falling asleep. Walter, who discovered that less frequent pleasure actually brought more energy and more joy. Gerald, who stood up and stretched before his private time and avoided a serious blood clot. And Martin, who rewired his entire experience by choosing content that respected rather than overwhelmed his nervous system. Each of these men thought they were alone in their concerns. Each of them believed that what they were feeling was strange or shameful. But what they found, and what I hope you're starting to see, is that there's nothing shameful about wanting to feel good. There's nothing wrong with seeking connection, even when you're by yourself. The real risk lies not in the act, but in how we approach it, especially as we grow older. You have more power than you think, more control than you've been told, and more reasons than ever to care for your body, not just for survival, but for joy. You deserve to feel safe in your body. You deserve to experience pleasure without fear, and you deserve to know the truth about how your body works, not in whispers or judgment, but with clarity, science, and compassion. So if even one of these 7 mistakes resonated with you, I invite you to start there. Just one change. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. Start small, start kind, and trust that every adjustment you make is a step toward a healthier, stronger, more connected version of you. And if no one else has said this to you in a while, let me be the one. You are still a man. You are still worthy. And you are still capable of strength, vitality, and deeply fulfilling intimacy, no matter your age. Thank you for spending this time with me. Now go live well and take care of yourself, not just for today, but for all the years still ahead.